Welcome to the Roundtable. I am Jennifer Eller, and with me today is my co-host Mike Hill, and our producer Nick Wilson, and then our guest is Josh Atkins.
Yeah.
Yay!
Did you almost not get it out?
I know. I about
Were
did
you going
it.
to call him Jake?
I don't know what I was going to call him.
Because you kind of went like, John Atkinson. Sorry. No, I just didn't know if it was like if you had. You've never had that like when you're talking to somebody and you forget their name?
I have, but I think it threw me off because I'm in a different seat today.
Oh, got it.
So it's weird. You don't think one little thing moving to the left would throw you off.
And we all know why Jennifer had to move to the middle, right?
Because I'm a troublemaker and I have to be between people?
No, because you need to be the center of attention.
That is so not the case.
Everybody that knows Jennifer knows
No.
that. And she wanted to be under the deer head.
No.
Let's just be honest.
The real reason is so we can get more of a clearer shot of our guest and not a wider shot of all of us. So we can concentrate on them and their story and they don't have to see us. So we're hoping that this is better. So what I saw in the camera looked really good. So I'm excited for this little bit of a change. So anyway, so Josh, we want to get to know you a little bit. So what are some of your hobbies? What do you like to do?
Oh my gosh. I haven't been asked that question in a while. Hobbies. Who has time for hobbies these days? Besides being a dad, we talked a little bit a few minutes ago about traveling. Realized that besides work traveling with my wife and son, really enjoy that. This year so far, we've already been on a cruise. I think we went to Mexico, Costa Maya, Honduras, and then we went to West Virginia and a few other places this year.
Did you like cruising?
My wife likes cruising.
Okay.
I don't necessarily love cruising.
Did you get sea legs afterwards?
Yeah, when we were in Mexico, I was a little wobbly. As far as being seasick, I've never had that problem. I know Meg, she always takes Dramamine a couple of days before and during the trip. But, for me, cruising, I would much rather... I don't like the heat. When we were in Mexico, it was like 105 degrees and humidity, and I'm just dripping sweat. I'm like, this isn't fun. But they're having fun, so I guess I'm having fun.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it is what it is. You're eating mediocre food for 5 to 7 days.
You're eating what?
Mediocre food. It's nothing great.
Really?
Everybody
says the cruise thing's the best because it's like buffet all the time.
Yeah, it's very mid buffet food.
So are you like a foodie?
I'm a picky eater, I guess.
Are you?
My wife says I'm a kindergarten sometimes. Yeah.
Okay.
How bad can you make ribs taste? And when you get on a cruise, I feel like you're eating the worst of the worst. You're eating that, no offense, Aldi, I don't want anybody to get sued, but you're eating like the bottom of the barrel Aldi ribs, and it's just not good.
Okay.
So I like going with my wife and son when we cruise. Me personally, if I had to go by myself, absolutely not. I would much rather go do anything else.
Like?
Sports. I love basketball. Huge basketball fan. Been an
who do you
NBA
like?
fan. The Lakers. Now, not LeBron James. I always get asked that. Are you a LeBron fan? Nah. It's always great when he comes to your team. Cancer in the locker room, I guess people would say. But been a diehard Lakers fan since I was 4. My wife actually bought me Lakers tickets, I think back in 2018 or 19, and we actually went to LA.
Wow.
And I had no idea until we got there. We sat nosebleed seats. They were ridiculously expensive because LeBron had just come that year. Spoke to a lady who worked there, said, hey, huge Lakers fan, first time here. She said, there's some seats down here by second quarter. If the people who haven't come for season tickets, if they're not there, they're not coming, so you guys can sit there. So second quarter comes, my wife and I walked down there, talked to her. We ended up sitting 15 rows up from courtside, which was amazing to see. So besides sports, video games, sometimes if I have time, it's one of those brain rot things that you can just sit there and not really have to think about anything.
Xbox or PlayStation?
I have a PS5 and an Xbox.
Wow, you have them both.
And ridiculously just bought a PC because my friends talked me into it, and my wife finally said, you can do it. Been thinking about it for 4 or 5 years. Big financial decisions like that are ridiculously expensive for no reason. Takes me a little bit to just
Meaning
say,
a PC is it's an expensive endeavor.
Yeah, I shouldn't have bought it, to be honest, because I'm not, it's not going, I'm not
I was just curious. I didn't know. I thought the PS5s were expensive.
Yeah, those I think now are like $399, but the PC,
really?
I built it, so all the individual parts, it was, pretty expensive. Not worth the price in my opinion, but hey, I mean, my son will play it if I'm not. So
yeah, and what is the thing?
Used.
Like, what's the game that's like I have to have a PC to play it?
I don't know. All my other friends had it, and they're like, "Hey, you should get it."
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was a certain game on a PC.
I mean, there's some games that aren't on console. I mean, you have Call of Duty, which is on console, PC. There's this. Let's see. There's a game called Ready or Not. I think it's like a SWAT shooter game.
Okay.
That's on PC. That's not on console. Something like that. But nothing, super interested in. It was just having it. But I could also use it as a work desktop. So it kind of has a second use out of it that I'll say. And
do you ever wear the goggle things?
We do have a VR. Okay. My wife bought me that for Christmas a few years ago. That was one that I just can't do. I feel sick when I play it. No, I feel really sick when I'm playing it.
Really?
Just standing up. Have you ever tried it?
No, but I've thought if I do anything, I thought that's what I would want to do.
I mean, some of it's okay. It was really cool when you could connect it to basketball games or sports games, and it looks like you're sitting courtside. But playing video games and you're up and standing around and moving, I just can't do it. My son Carter, who's 10, that's his jam. He loves it. He's up there just running and jumping and yelling and screaming.
I mean, you can watch a TV show through that thing.
Yeah, you can watch movies. When I first got it, I would just lay out in the backyard, put a blanket down, just kind of look up the sky, watch the game. I mean, it's fun just be out there in the backyard. Yeah.
Have you done that, Jennifer?
No.
Do you play video games?
No.
Ever?
No.
Okay.
I watched Trevor do it. So my son has a PC.
Yeah.
And he was down at the office, and we stopped by this weekend, and I just stood there and kind of watched him. And he's all over the place. I can't even focus. Okay. He's running here and there. And I said, how do you even know who to shoot? How do you know you're
he
playing
does the shooter game?
Yeah. How do you know it's on your team? He's like, you just know. And I'm like, I have no idea how to do it. I'm like, I'd be dead the first time somebody come around. Yeah. But they're intense. I think they're
Brad
intense.
Banter, I think, is your nephew, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually was the one that came over the other day and helped me finish fixing it.
Yeah.
Because I'd had it for almost a month, and I'm like, Brad, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And he actually came over and spent a good 3 or 4 hours, I think, Friday actually.
Is he like a computer genius or something?
Yeah, I think he's in IT. He does something for Ball State, I think, for IT. Super smart when it comes to computers.
Wow.
I'm sitting here just reading this list of stuff to do, and you don't need that. Let me do it. And he just did it, and I'm just like, man, that's impressive.
Yeah.
Like, good for you. I don't know if I just can't get that concept through as I'm reading it. It just looks like Aramaic. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Agreed.
Some of that stuff's almost as hard as putting together IKEA furniture. You got 45 pages for 2 parts. You're like, this is ridiculous. This isn't fun.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, that's kind of my my hobbies. I mean, nothing great. Again, I don't have a ton of free time. I'd like to have more hobbies. I bought a drone once to try that. Returned it a few days later. It's just my ADHD doesn't let me keep hobbies long either. It's you spend money on one hobby, you're into it for a couple of months, and then boom, you're on to the next thing. And then it sits for, years. Like my wife's rock tumbler that I bought you for Christmas.
Your what?
Her rock tumbler.
Because you can polish rocks. You put them in there and you spin it and then they get real shiny and stuff.
Well, is this your hobby?
No.
I mean, you piped up like that was your, like, I've been tumbling rocks this weekend. No.
I don't have any hobbies.
You have no hobbies?
Not really.
Jennifer, not
okay,
one
we're talking
hobby.
about Josh. No, I don't have hobbies, but I know what he's talking about.
Nick, you have a hobby?
I like to play video games.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
You can hook up with Nick.
We're going to have to play, man.
Yeah.
But so her rock tumbler, she's kind of the same way. She'll start a hobby and then it just kind of sits after a few months for eternity. It just sits there and doesn't get used.
I used to do that with stuff, and I don't spend money on anything like that anymore. It does.
I should probably.
Yeah.
You used to be the QVC lady?
No, I wasn't QVC. I was really big into like scrapbooking. That used to be like a thing. I remember like one anniversary, Eric and I went down to Brown County, and this embossing was really big, like making your own cards and stuff. And so I bought all of this stuff, and I tried to make my own Christmas cards one year. I mean, it's like, got rid of all of that. So I put some money into things too, and like Longaberger baskets, and got rid of things. So I have all these baskets. Do you need any Longaberger baskets? I do not need any, and I don't even know what to do with the ones I got, because I have some that used to be expensive, and now you can't get anything for them. And I'm like, what do I do with them now? So I just, I don't buy a whole lot of stuff anymore because it's not worth it.
Hobbies.
So, hobbies, yes. Love
Everybody's got to have a hobby, Jennifer. You need to
Then I would like to go hiking is my hobby. I don't do it very often, but that's what I do love.
There you go.
To do. So,
Love that.
Okay, well, that that was a lot. So we're going to.
What do you mean?
I was going to ask another question, but he shared a lot. So I'm not saying that was a lot like he's a lot. That was just like, that
I'm a
was.
lot.
No, that was great. So we're just going to kind of like jump into your story a little bit. So you had shared with me, we actually shared a lot like in Discover Life. And so when I heard your story, I thought that was a story that really needed to be shared. And so you were talking about some questions I had asked you regarding your childhood, like your parents were really into drugs. You went to the foster care system, and I know you're going to talk about that. But was faith any part of that when you were a kid? I assume your parents didn't have an upbringing maybe with church, or?
I don't think that he did. Full transparency, my biological father just recently passed away a month and a half ago, and I haven't really told my story since, so I don't know how it'll come out because I'm not sure how that's still affecting me. But I don't think that my parents had any sort of relationship with Jesus. I don't remember ever seeing a Bible in our house. I don't remember my parents ever talking about God. I do know that my dad had a guy, Father Jim Bates, who was a priest at Ball State at the time when my dad was 16 or 17. He ran away in the middle of winter, ended up at the girls' dorm at Ball State, and they said, hey, we need somebody to take this young man. And Jim took my dad in and kind of became, a mentor to him and a father figure, and just kind of help guide him and raise him. Well, you would think help and guide him, looking at his life, that didn't really work out well for him. But I would say outside of his influence, because he just kind of stayed with my dad through the rest of my dad's life. And when I was young enough, I remember calling him Papaw. He just became Papaw. We'd go to Our Lady of Grace in Noblesville, and I remember going to his office and eating peppermint candies and butterscotch. But outside of him, there wasn't really any sort of influence with religion or Jesus. But I do, bouncing around through that foster care system, in the beginning, there wasn't a lot of love and people who showed the love of Jesus that I saw. We ended up at a group home called the Christian Youth Home in Fortville, and that was supposed to be Christian Youth Home because it's literally in the name. You're thinking that you're going to go to this home and these people are going to love you like the church tells them to, and it was the complete opposite.
So how old were you at this time that you guys got removed?
At that point, I think I was 11 or 12. Let me back up a little bit to kind of put us in a perspective of where we're at now. So I was removed from home when I was 9 or 10. I don't remember the exact age. I do know that my earliest memory that I remember as a child, I had to be 3 or 4. My sister wasn't around yet, and she's about 4.5, 5 years younger than I am. And I remember having to call 911 because my dad was abusing my mom. And then my next memory is my dad, my mom, my sister, and I all living in a house in Noblesville, and then my sister having to call the police because my parents are into it again. And then, fast forward 5 or 6 years, I think things were good at that point, at least from a child's perspective on the outside looking in. And, as a 7, 8-year-old, you're getting all of these toys, your parents are showing you all this love, you think life is great. You're getting brand new toys every day. It's awesome. But that wasn't, the case. It started finally making sense to me that there was something wrong when my parents would continuously have new babysitters come over. And I remember on Thanksgiving, and at this point we had my brother Dylan with us. He might have been 1.5, but we had this babysitter. She was there, and her boyfriend had come over later that evening, and they had got into it. And he ended up beating her and throwing her through our glass kitchen table. And I had to sneak my little brother and sister out of our parents' bedroom window to get us down to the neighbor's house to make sure we're safe. My parents didn't show up for maybe 2 more days after that. We stayed with, the shepherds down the road for 2 or 3 days. And then our parents showed up and everything was fine again. That's looking back at it now, that's what you think. What kind of crock of a story is that? Nothing's fine.
Kids are resilient, though. I mean, that's the thing that you always see in that is just like that. I mean, your parents could be gone for 2 days, and it's like, hey, they're back, and let's go back to try to be normal.
Right, everything's
I wonder
good
what
again.
your neighbors thought who had you.
I think their life was pretty messed up too. I
Okay.
grew up in Anderson, and in that time where we were living in Anderson, it wasn't the best area. And I do remember, and being friends with some of these people on Facebook now, some of the kids that I grew up with, looking at where their parents are, their lives are pretty similar to mine. I think our parents all ran in the same group. They were all addicts, and they just chose that over, their kids.
And they would just shuffle the kids around.
Pretty much,
Right.
yeah. And when that stopped, when the parents, either went to jail or they moved away, which happened frequently. I think I was in 6 different schools by the time I was in the 3rd grade. We would have to eat out of trash cans, so I wasn't going to put my sister and brother through that. They weren't going to have to go pick out a trash can. It was me. I had to be the one to go pick out of the trash can because I was the oldest. It was my responsibility to take care of my parent or my brother and sister. I'm the parent, and so I would be the one who would go and pick out of trash cans and pick the best looking food for them, and I would be the one who eats, the chicken wing that barely has any meat left over because they needed something to eat. That was my job, I felt like, at the time. So, still in that time period, my dad goes to prison. My mom, she loses the house that we're in, so we end up living in a hotel, a motel, I guess, a Roach Motel in Anderson. And Papal, Jim Bates, was the one who was fronting the bill every week for it. It was one of the pay-as-you-go kind of things. I think it was, at the time, maybe $30 a week. But you got HBO, so that was great, right? That's what they advertised. So, we're living there, and at the time, I just remember, I'm not going to school. This is great. Who in their right mind as a, 3rd, 4th grader wants to go to school anyway? So I'm having the time of my life. And then cops show up, and they show up under the disguise of, we're here because you forgot to return a Blockbuster video a few years back. And what it really was is my mom was under investigation for neglect and abuse for not taking us to school. My first year of 4th grade, I missed 103 days of school. Wow. My second year, I missed 90 days. And that was because my mom didn't take us to school. And so we ended up leaving that motel and going to a friend of hers that she was dating. At the time, she was in her 30s. He was just an older man. I think he was in his late 80s. She was using him for his money, and he was supplying her with drugs and everything that she needed. And I think he got pretty ticked one night when she didn't come home, and he called CPS, and they happened to show up the next day. And I'm out looking for food for my brother and sister. My brother's in a 2 or 3 day old diaper that hasn't been changed. My sister has head lice. So they said, hey, we've got to take these kids. Nobody's taking care of them. And that's exactly what they did. They removed us. They split my brother up from us, put him in a foster home. And my sister and I went to an emergency shelter care in Anderson. We were there for 30 days or so, and then they moved us to a foster home in Elwood, Indiana. And I think I told you guys about this. The Elwood home is the foster home where the foster dad was a part of the KKK, and we found out, and we're like, okay, I'm young. I don't necessarily know what the KKK is, but probably shouldn't be in this house. So we told our caseworker, and they moved us. Bounced around to a few different orphanages and group homes at that point. Ended up at a place called YOC right before the Christian Youth Home in Muncie. And that was the Youth Opportunity Center. And that was kind of supposed to be our last spot before we went to the Christian Youth Home and then transition back with our parents. Because at this point, apparently they're doing great in life. From what our caseworkers telling us, they're following the programs. They're trying to get their lives back together. And, us as kids, we're just so excited because we're going to go home to our parents. This is what we've wanted for, almost a year at this point. And so we leave this Youth Opportunity Center, go to the Christian Youth Home, being told that, hey, you guys are going to be here 3 to 5 months, and then you're going home. We promise. We get there. Things are fine for the first few months. Every day after school, I'm going into the office, waiting for a phone call from my dad and mom. They're coming every single day. Things are going great. Then finally the calls start missing. They're not calling as much. I'm waiting in the office for an hour and a half thinking my dad, he's going to call. Oh, they're ringing. He's calling now. It's not him. And then they just stop coming altogether. The calls just stop coming. And then the same with my mom. And it turned out things weren't going as great as they thought they were. Both of my parents were still struggling with their addiction, and they chose to go back into that addiction. And around this time is when they decided, my mom decided, I'm going to turn over my rights because it just is going to be easier for my kids. It's better for them in the long run. Right. And my dad, the things that he would say to us was extremely manipulative, and blame it all on my mom. Hey, it's her fault. I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that you guys are going to come home with me. Just lying straight to us, not thinking that we would ever find out about it. And eventually he just turned his rights over too. And we went from the sibling group to my sister and I were in this abusive Christian youth program, and we think that we're going to go home to our parents, and we're missing our little brother who's a state over in foster care, and now we're stuck. What is going to happen to us? So when they eventually lost their rights were terminated, we were told that, hey, we're going to try to find a foster home for you guys, and eventually adoptive home. At this point in my life, I'm 13, 14. I'm a teenager who has gone through an extremely broken system that doesn't really look out for the kids like it's supposed to sometimes. And I'm scared. I don't want to go to another home that's going to adopt me. They're not my parents. They're not going to love me like my parents should have. So we tried it. We found this home that they had 3 kids of their own. They lived in a huge farm in Newcastle, horses. Our caseworker talked it up like it was going to be Disneyland going there, and I was so excited. So we went. We tried it out for a weekend. I was like, okay, this is great. Let's try it again. So we went for a week for vacation with them, and it was fun. And then we ended up moving in. My sister, me, and our little brother at the time, Dylan. He was maybe 6. And for a while, it was fine. And then I happened to stumble in one day, and I heard them talking, the mom and the dad, and they were talking about they just wanted Dylan. They wanted a little boy. But if they went through the process, they'd have to adopt all of us. And they weren't sure if they wanted to do that. And to me, I had already been thrown out by everybody else. So I'm just going to leave. What's going to make this any different? If you don't want me, why stay here? So that's about the time that I started acting up and saying, hey, the world owes me everything, and I'm going to get it, and they're going to give it to me. And I'm not going to be here if they don't want me to, so I'm going to act out. I started stealing. I started just being a horrible kid because I didn't have somebody to sit me down and say, listen, this isn't what you should be doing. It's more of we're going to beat the crap out of you. If you continue doing this, we're going to beat you with a belt. And I just need somebody to sit me down and say, this isn't the way you should be acting. We need to get you into counseling. We need to get you talking to somebody. We need you to open up, and we need you to learn how to be a 13-year-old kid, because this isn't it. Your mentality is the world's out to get you. And I really thought they were. And I mean, even into, early college, I just really felt like the world owed me things because of what it put me through. So I ended up leaving that foster home and going back to the emergency shelter care. And from there, I had 3 choices. I could go back to the foster home and get adopted. I could go to White's Residential in Wabash, or I could go back to the Christian Youth Home. Well, the family doesn't want me, so why would I want to go back? If I go to the Christian Youth Home, I'm just going to get abused again anyway, so why would I go there? So my only other option is to go to White's. And from what I hear about White's is they're making you clean toilets with toothbrushes, and they're just as abusive. And I'm like, I'm not going there, so I'm just going to run away. So me and another kid, we both decided, hey, we're going to run away. And we were walking back from rec one day, and we just said, this is it. And we just took off running. And keep in mind, we're 13, 14 years old at this time, and we're gone for 3 weeks. 2 13-year-old teenage boys on the run in Anderson, Indiana. The people I know are all connected to drug dealers and not great people, and the same with him. So we're bouncing around from our friends' couches. Their parents are letting us stay with them. They're trying to get us to try marijuana and alcohol. And, luckily at the time, I just wasn't something I, wanted to try, so I didn't dabble in it. And I thank God every day that I didn't, because I don't know where I would be if I jumped into that at that point in my life. Eventually it was, I'm getting really hungry. I'm tired of eating ravioli and SpaghettiOs from our friends. And so I made the decision that I was just going to go turn myself in. And I did. Spent a weekend in juvenile detention center, and they said, hey, we're going to ship you to White's. And I said, I guess I don't have a choice at this point. So, I ended up at White's in Wabash, and it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. It's, I never cleaned toilets with the toothbrush. Was never abused. They did have restraints there. If you acted up and you got physical, if you needed to be restrained, you would. Luckily that wasn't something I ever had to go through. And as somebody who, struggled in past group homes and placements where they had level systems, because I was always in trouble, always being on level 1, going to White's and being able to succeed and get through the program and be on level 4, which was the highest, at that time in my life, that was fantastic. I'm like, I've made it. I am, I'm somebody cool. I'm getting to sit at the level 4 dinner table with all my buddies because we've made it. I just felt great because I'm following this program for the first time. The nice thing about White's, it is a Christian organization, so you have to go to chapel whether you like it or not. And at first, I didn't want to go to chapel. I was like, I don't want to go and sing. I don't want to listen to, this guy with a weird toupee preach for 15 minutes and just drone on.
Good thing you don't have a toupee, because he wouldn't want to listen to you.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And it is funny how White's, the rap that they get. And that's why I think, they've changed it now to Josiah White, because there was such a White's Institute had a name, back then. So,
and his name was Pastor Mike as well. So Pastor Mike, if you hear this, I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
Let me ask a question, because I keep thinking about your brother and your sister. So, what did they stay with that family, or the family let them go too? I mean, you took off. I mean, where are they?
So my sister and brother are still there at this point. My sister eventually leaves, but my brother actually ends up getting adopted by them a little bit down the road. So I'm there at White's. Things are going great. Ashley and Dylan are still at the Lester's house. And then I get the chance to go to so I skipped over Mike, Pastor Mike. So I'm sitting there in church every day, and I'm just like, man, this isn't, fun. This isn't what I want to hear every day. And then I don't know what it was. Just one day I went, and there you're forced to go through counseling, and I didn't want to talk to. I was a teenage boy who didn't want to open up about his emotions, and I don't remember what it was, but it was something that triggered me that day, and I was emotional. And I just remember the song was "I Can Only Imagine," and we're sitting up there singing, and I had never sang in the chapel at all, and I'm just like, maybe I'm just gonna close my eyes and just see how it feels. And I started singing. I'm like, okay, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but I feel better. And around this time, starting to go through the transition of they want to get me out of White's because I've completed the program. I don't need to be there, but I have nowhere to go. They're not going to send me back to this home who doesn't want me. These other group homes, I got in trouble and probably wasn't the best for me to be there. But they also didn't want me to be so institutionalized that when I graduated high school, that I leave a residential facility and they throw me into real life and I don't know how to cope. So they found me a home in Wabash, Rita and Verna Millette, and they said, hey, we want you to go try this out. And I said, no. And they said, yeah. And I said, I have no choice, so we're going to go. So I went for a weekend. And I'll be honest, and they know this, so if they listen, they'll chuckle, but I didn't like it. I'm a teenage boy. I want parents who are in their 30s and in their early 40s. I don't want parents who are in their 60s. It just didn't make sense to me. I have things that I want to do, and I want my dad to do it with me. So I didn't like it. And they had this boy who I was at White's with, Jesse, loved him to death, great guy, but just a lot different than I was. Just very loud, very much into Pokemon and everything that I was not. And it just rubbed me the wrong way. So I didn't like it that first weekend. And then I tried it again, and I said, okay, I I can get past some of this stuff. It's nicer than White's. I have my own room. The food's much better. I don't have 15 other teenage boys screaming at all hours of the day. This might work. So I tried it. And like I told you guys at the Discover Life that we had, that those are my mom and dad to this day. I went and I never left, is what I tell people. That moment that I went there, I knew I was home. So I went my summer going into my freshman year, and I lived there until I graduated high school. And Rita and Vernon, they were the ones who introduced me to Christ. They, with Whites, when you have foster kids, they don't have to go to church if they don't want to. If they say, I don't want to go to church, you have to find, care for them, or one of you have to stay back. We didn't get that option. Vernon said, you're going to go to church whether you like it or not. And sure, I was ticked off in the beginning. It's like, if I don't want to go to church, why should I have to go to church? But eventually it made sense, and I see why he did it, and I'm ever grateful that he did do that. Sitting down with him and having a conversation one day of, why did my parents not love me like you love your kids? Why do my parents not love me like you love me? And I'm not even your child. You don't know me from anyone, and you chose to bring me into your house. And he said, son, I'll never know the answer to that. I just know that God put me in a place that I'm able to do this, and I'm going to do it until he tells me I can't do it anymore. And he said, if you ever learn anything in this house, he said, learn that I love you and that God loves you, and that no matter what, he's always going to be there with you. And that just stuck with me. And if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. That stuck with me too. Because, there's a lot of times that I was dumb, and he made sure that I knew, and he was tough on me. But I needed that. I needed somebody who was going to show me grace, but also lead me in the direction that I need to go when I'm not going in the direction that I need to go. And he gave me that balance, and he really taught me how to be a man. Like when I was joking with you guys at the life class, that taught me to shave. I don't shave. He taught me how to change the oil in the car, taught me how to change the tire, taught me just how to be a man, but also how to love other people, because we're taught as men that we shouldn't have those emotions. And in the last 10 years as a father, I've been more emotional as a man than I ever have been. And I'm just grateful for Vernon, because God put him in my life for a reason. And I don't know what that reason is. I just know that I'm loved by him and Rita. And a couple weeks ago, they celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. And if they hadn't loved each other 60 years ago, I don't know if I'd be here today. Because I don't know if I'd be bouncing around the system still. I don't know if I'd have 5 or 6 kids, if I'd be strung out somewhere or dead. And I owe a lot to them. And they really changed my life. And, by incorporating church and making sure that I'm going to youth group and that I'm asking questions, they were able to help me open up my eyes and see Jesus. We went to church after camp one day, and I was just so on fire. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm on fire for, but I'm on fire. And they're like, I think you need Jesus. And I was like, probably. I think I have him. They're like, no, I don't think you have him. And, I accepted Christ that night at our youth event at the church, and got baptized 2 weeks or so later with a couple of my buddies who got saved. And again, I was super on fire for Jesus. And then I went to college and just kind of fizzled out there. And then slowly trying to regain it back as an adult, kind of putting that aside for a second and stepping back to the foster care aspect. So I'm with mom and dad for, 4 years, graduate high school. Literally the next day after I graduated, I moved to Fort Wayne to IPFW. So I go from 4 years of being safe and secure in a home to being thrown into college life, IPFW dorm, with 3 other dudes who I have no idea who they are, with 3 different personalities. And it was a wild time, just going straight from having so much structure to absolutely nothing. Now I can eat whatever I want. Now I can do whatever I want. So that was a struggle there for a minute, being able to balance knowing the right things to do and saying, I have so much freedom now. I can do whatever I want. If I want to go out to Pierre's and, because at the time Pierre's was one of the biggest nightclubs in the world. And I'm 21 years old now at this point with my friends. Like, we live at IPFW. It's a mile down the road. Let's go to Pierre's. So it turned into a lot of drunken nights, drunken college nights, and just living a lifestyle that wasn't pleasing to God. And there was many nights where I sat up where I'm like, I was so on fire for Jesus. And then just having all of this freedom thrown at me at once, I'll take a drink of a beer here and there, and I'll say, oh, yeah, it'll be fine tomorrow. I'll stop. I won't drink again. And then the next night, here we are again, back at Pierre's, just getting wasted and having the time of our life that we're thinking. And it just becomes a cycle that you can't get out of unless you really, really try. And finally, one day, I was just like, this isn't something that I want to continue down. I always told myself I wasn't going to try drugs because my parents were addicts. So why am I getting wasted every night and doing that? Because it's just as much as a drug as, marijuana or all of these other ones. And it's destroying my body, and I just can't continue doing this. So eventually, put that aside and said, hey, I'm ready to kind of grow up, ready to stop acting like the entire world owes me everything, because they don't. They didn't do anything to me. It was my mom and dad who put me in that situation. And I just had to go with the flow. And, being a young adult at this time in college, I tried to reconnect with my parents. At the time, my mom was still an addict. She super manipulative, and I just really wanted to have that relationship with her and my dad, because again, they're my parents. I craved that feeling. Although I love, Rita and Vernon, who again I call mom and dad now, they just weren't legitimately my mom and dad, and it was just one of those thoughts in my head that like I have to reconnect with them. It just wouldn't work though. My dad, he was in prison. He back in 2005 stabbed his ex-wife at the time 17 times because he wanted to get back with her, and she just didn't want to get back together. And so he broke into her house and stabbed her one night. And it's still wild to me, almost 20 years later, that he stabbed his ex-wife because, up until his death, he's still legally married to my mother. So I don't even know how he got married again in Indiana. So, but yeah, so he, was in prison for 52 years, and it was one of those things where he had been in prison so much in his life that he had gotten 2 to 5 years, and, in Indiana at that time it was serve half for good behavior. So he was getting out, and they said, hey, we'll give you a 10-year sentence, you serve half, you're good. And he said, no, I'm going to fight it because I didn't do it. And they hit him with the book. They gave him 52 years for attempted murder. Wow. And until the day he died last month, he was in prison. He was set to get out, I think, in 2029. So he just had a few more years left to get out. So, I'm trying to have this relationship with them. I'm going to visit him. And it's just, if you do this for me, if you try to get this lawyer to talk to me, if you try to sway this judge this way or this court system this way, I'll make sure that your papaw buys you a brand new Xbox or buys you a brand new car, and using all these manipulative tactics to try to get me to do things for him to make his life easier and to help him out. And that's not what I should have been doing as a even as a young adult, as a man. That's not my job. It's not my responsibility for him who's in prison. Especially when we didn't have a relationship before that, and when you, as a father, let me down and walked out of my life. So I said, hey, I don't need this because, you're not physically abusing me, but this is abuse too. You guys are manipulative. I can't stand for this in my life. So I just, I walked away. And at that time I found a girl that we went to opposite school. She went to Southwood. I went to Wabash. But we met again in college through a friend, and, we fell in love and we got married. And, around this time, my dad, he swallowed a razor blade because he was like, I'm just done with it. And I was the only family who was close enough that I could sign paperwork for them to do surgery. So I'm like, he wrote me back in. Like, he just wrote me right back in, and it was that easy. And my wife at the time, Abby, we're having this conversation as we're driving to the hospital, and she's like, "You don't have to do this." And I said, "But I feel like I do. I feel like it's still my responsibility to go there and take care of him because he's my dad." And looking back now, all these years later, I know it wasn't. I still think I did the right decision to sign the paperwork for them to surgically remove the razor blade. Because I wouldn't have been able to have the closure that we had, a few months ago. And I don't know if I could have been able to sit with myself at night and be okay with that. So, I'm married to this woman. We're having a great life. We have a beautiful young boy. Things are growing great. Still not in church. At the time she and still, she's not a believer.
You're living in Fort Wayne?
At the time, yeah, we were living in Fort Wayne at that time. And then we'd actually, right after my son was born, we pretty closely after moved back to Wabash. So I'd say he was probably 6 or 7 months when we moved back. And that was more of, we want to be closer to her family. And, Rita and Vernon, we want to be close to them because they all live within a few miles of each other. So we moved home. Things were going great. Still, not going to church. I'd bring it up every now and again. It just wasn't her thing. So by default, I was like, hey, it's not my thing either. And things were great until they weren't. Me not having that stable relationship from a mom and dad and seeing how a married husband and wife are supposed to love each other. I just saw, and granted, Vernon, he loves his wife so much. But he's old school. He goes out and he works all day, and that was his job. That's what he would do. He'd go out and work all day, and that's how he would support his family. And he was just a very tough love kind of guy. You didn't get much emotion from it. You knew he loved you, but it was just that tough love. So that was my concept of love, is that I need to go out and I need to work my tail off so she doesn't have to work, and so our son's taken care of. And that's what I did. And by doing that, I missed a lot of the early critical stuff of my son growing up, and I missed out on that relationship. When I came home, I wouldn't want to do the dishes. Like, I just worked all day. Why the heck would I want to do the dishes? Why would I want to help with dinner? And just very selfish, immature Josh at that point in my life, because again, I'm young and I still kind of think the world owes me something, and I still kind of want to be a young man who just happened to have a baby at 23, 24 years old, and just not sure if I was ready to grow up at that point. And, she made a decision like, hey, this isn't working out. And, at the time I felt like she dropped a bomb on me. She'd given me, a year to get my act together. And, I wasn't out doing anything crazy. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't drinking. I wasn't cheating on her. I was working, but I wasn't being a husband. I was coming home and being distant, just disassociating from everything and just jumping into video games. And, I'd feed my son if I had to and change him when I needed to. And that was pretty much it. And so she gave me ample opportunity. She told me many times, and, I just kept playing with the fire, I guess. And it finally just one day she said, I can't do it anymore. And when she dropped that bomb, it all just kind of came down, and I'm like, oh, hindsight's 20/20. When I look back, yeah, you gave me so many chances. I, sitting there going through it, you're like, oh, she's just kidding. No, she wasn't. And, I went through a bout of depression there. Going through all of that I went through in my early childhood and early adult life, young adult life, I never had really felt depressed, and which is wild thinking the things that I went through. I mean, there's so many scary stories that happened in my life that I haven't shared with you guys, being locked in a closet by mom's boyfriend and things like that. But having that bomb drop that we're getting a divorce and that I'm losing my wife and that potentially losing my son, it just threw me into a spiral. I remember being at work one day, and at this point I was working at Midwest Eye Consultants in Wabash, sitting at my desk, and I just felt like somebody had put me in a sleeping bag and thrown me underwater and just held me there. I just started dripping sweat, and I just couldn't breathe. And now I know at the time that was probably a panic attack. And I left work, and I told him, I said, I've got to go. Something's wrong. And on the drive home, I was a floater that month, so I was in Kokomo. And I remember driving back, and at one point, I looked at the oncoming traffic. I said, I'm going to drive in traffic. I said, there's nothing else to live for. My life is done. I'm divorced. I'm losing my wife and son. You know, life has really dealt me a cruddy hand. This is it. I drove up about another mile, and I'm like, this intersection, I'm going to drive through it. And there was a sign that said, if you need help, call. And it was the suicide awareness help. And I called, and I said, I don't want to be here anymore. My wife's leaving me. My son's not going to love me anymore. This is it. I kind of just want to drive into this semi that's about to come. And the lady on the phone, she said, I don't know you. She said, I love you, and I don't want you to do it. She said, you need to be here. She said, no matter how bad life is going to get, she said, that baby boy needs you. And I'll never forget that. That baby boy needs you. And I said, you're right. And I hung up, I drove home, and I went to, my wife's house, and I said, I have to see our son. And I just held him for an hour, and I just cried. And I knew right then that I had to be there for my son, and I had to make sure that I was going to be the dad that I needed for him, that he's going to have somebody that he can look up to, and that he's going to have someone that he can be proud of. And that was the day that I said, I've got to get my act together. So, we're going through this divorce, and it wasn't pretty. We didn't get along. We fought a lot. And, there's things that I regret of us fighting in front of our son at that early age, and, fighting with her stepdad, getting almost in a full-out fist fight with him and having the cops called. And I'm just like, this isn't how I want to live my life. I don't want to be, my last name is already associated with so much trash and garbage that I don't want to continue that legacy. This isn't what my son needs. And so I said, you know what? Whatever you want in a divorce, I'll sign it. I don't want to drag this out any longer. It's not mentally great for either one of us. So let's just get it done. And we did. And there for a while, it was tough. It hurt. It sucked. It was some of the worst times of my life. I wasn't getting to see my son at the time. I think some of that was where I was at probably mentally, and with her and our arguing. So that made it even harder. And then, one day I just said, I'm going to try to go back to church this weekend. Texted one of my buddies and said, hey, are you still going to New Life, which was, our home church in Wabash, which was a Baptist church. And he said, no, I'm actually going up to Wallen in Fort Wayne. He said, as Baptist, come with me. And so went up to Wallen with him, and of course it's Baptist, and it was Sunday, and we had food that day. And I'm like, hey, we're grubbing on some good food. I'm going to come back next week. Went back next week. They didn't have food. But it just, I felt at peace. I felt like God was saying, come home. It's time to come back. But of course it was on Josh's time, and I'm like, I'm not ready. There's still a heck of a lot of sinning out there I want to do. And I feel like mentally that's probably where I was at without consciously making that decision out loud. And then I just, one day I was at work again, and I'm like, this lifestyle just isn't fun. And again, I'm not doing drugs, or I'm just out there drinking, just partying with my friends, hanging out, getting my son maybe once a month because just things aren't going right. And I'm like, I'm ready to be that dad. I made this promise to myself that it's time to wake up, and I thought I did, and I didn't, and here we are again. And so I woke up and I said, it's time. And that was the day that I decided that, and Carter might have been 2.5 at the time. That was the day I decided that I'm going to be the dad that he needs, and I'm going to be the dad that I needed. And so that's when I slowly started going back to church again, full time. And then I was praying, God, send me somebody who is going to be okay with broken Josh, and who's going to be okay with having Carter here, but is also who's going to be okay with discovering life with me and discovering what the next step of our faith is together. And my wife, Megan, she jokes all the time, like, when I do something dumb, she'll say, I prayed to God for this. But, he put her in my life at, I think, the best time, because she came in and she was a breath of fresh air. one of the most kindest, loyal, just beautiful, most beautiful souls that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. She just radiates so much love towards other people. And I tell this to a lot of my friends when we talk about our wives, that I fell in love with Megan. We were in Toys R Us around Christmas, and I was just getting overwhelmed. It was so many people, last minute shopping, and I'm up at checkout. I don't want to wait 15 minutes in line for one toy. And I'm like, we got to go. And she was like, just wait. She's like, it's going to be worth it when you see his face. And I think that was the day that I said, I think I love this woman. I think this is the woman that I want to marry. So, fast forward a few years, we get married. We having a wonderful life, but something is missing. And she comes to me one day and she said, I think we should probably start going back to church. And I said, yeah, you're right. Let's try it. Let's check out a few different churches. So I just got on Google, started looking around. Okay, the Awakening's right down the road. So we went there a few times. Just wasn't our cup of tea. We went to New Life and Wabash a few times. Love the pastor there. Love him. Just, again, wasn't feeling fed. We tried here once, and like I told you and jokingly called you the bozo that one time, that my wife will not let me down, won't let it down. She's like, you called Mike a bozo 3 times? And I'm like, I know. I said I was on a roll. I don't mind. Mouth vomit.
I don't mind.
That's probably kind compared to some things that people
That's probably true. That is probably true. There have probably been a lot worse things said. Yes.
So yeah, we tried, and I don't know what it was, and truly I believe part of it was I just wasn't ready. And now you probably say it in my ear saying, hey, it's more fun to not go. It's more fun to not wake up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning when you've worked all week. And then my wife was like, well, they have a 10:30 or 11 service, so we can wake up even later. And that's what I kind of wrapped it up to be, is that I just wasn't ready at that point. And about 6 months goes by, and I don't know what it was, man. I just happened to be on Facebook, and I saw one of the reels, and I don't even remember what it was, but you were preaching something, and whatever it was, it just resonated with me. I said, okay, maybe let's try it one more time.
Maybe he's not a bozo.
Maybe he's not a bozo. Yeah, maybe he actually knows what he's talking about.
He's not.
And then we came back, and that was about, I'd say 9 or, well, it might be a little over a year now at this point. And we've been,
because you came when it was upstairs, didn't you? Once.
Yes.
Yeah,
the first time we came.
The first time
upstairs.
you came here, it was
yeah,
upstairs.
and so we came the second time. And like, what the heck just happened? This is totally
because
different.
the funny thing is, I remember specifically when you came because you had filled something out, and I went on, because this is what I used to do. Somebody come and I'd go on Facebook to try to figure out how to get to know him, so the next time I see him. But on there, whether it's your Facebook or something, it talked about your story of the foster care system and the whole whatever was on there, and I'm like, because that's always been my thing, is like, I think the foster care system's broke, but what if the church? If the church did our job right, there wouldn't even be a foster care system. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But I just thought it was interesting, because then I never really saw you after that, for a while. And then, to see you come back and be a part of, lately. So,
yeah, it's definitely been a joy being back. With all the traveling and things, it hasn't been every single Sunday, but catching it online, it's so nice having the ability to be able to watch it online these days. It's now it just kind of feels like home. Now it just it doesn't feel like a burden every Sunday getting up. It just feels like, hey, we're going to go to church. We're going to have a great time, listen to the message. And there's always, even if it's not until the very last part of the sermon, there's always something that just kind of kicks me in the face and like, oh, that was meant for you. Even if it was meant for everybody else, it was meant for you today. And I kind of jumped ahead a little bit. There, when Megan and I got married, we were talking about doing foster care for a while too. And that first year, we're like, yeah, let's just kind of wait. And then we became foster parents. We went through the process of becoming foster parents. And our first kid, Ali, came from Lebanon, and we wanted to do teenagers. When I was a foster youth myself, seeing teenagers in the system, they are the hardest to place. They are the hardest to get adopted, and they're usually the ones that age out with no family and usually become a statistic. And I didn't want I wanted to prevent that if we could. So we said, we're going to do teens. Ali came to our house. He came from Lebanon. He was a Muslim. He was in the States for 4 months before he wound up in a broken system. He came here to live with his brother, to go to school, and to have a better life. And, coming from a war-torn country to here, his brother just couldn't get it together. So he wound up in the system, and then he wound up with us. And you have this kid who is just so broken and heartbroken because he moved here for a better life, and now he's just in a stranger's home. And it was tough in the beginning because you have this kid with a totally different routine, a totally different religion that you don't really understand. And again, I can't force him to go to church. I want to, like Vernon did to me, but I felt like at the time that isn't what he needed. If I would have forced Ali to come to church, I don't think we'd still be having the conversations that we have today. And, he's more open to talking about Jesus when we text. And if we would have forced him, then it would have shut him out. So going through the process of learning how to celebrate Ramadan and setting, he can't eat, I think it was like sun up to sundown. So he's all day without food. And, we're setting up the best place in his room for him to have his prayer time and really get into his religion. But we also still want to show you that Jesus is in this house and that we love you and that Jesus loves you no matter what. And, out of all of our foster kids, we never would have thought that the kid who was a Muslim would have been the one who had the most questions about Jesus, wanted to know more and wanted to learn more. And, he left after maybe 9 or 10 months to a new home and then went with his brother. He's doing great in life. We had another kiddo come through who's doing pretty well in life. And then we had a girl come through, a teenage girl. And, looking back now, I know we'll never foster teenage girls again, especially with me working at home as much as I do. Because when you're in that situation, when you're doing it, your thought is, I'm just helping these kids. That's my only job, is I want to help these kids. I want to take care of them. I want to love them, teach them about Jesus, and I want to make sure that they feel loved when they're here. You don't think about anything that could be said or come of it. And, she had been there for 3-ish, 4-ish months, and her and my wife didn't get along for whatever reason. Just another teenager who's gone through the system, who knows how to be manipulative. She had a horrible life. She was sex trafficked. We're told that she's sex trafficked and all of these other horrible things, just to find out that stuff's not true. She lied about that stuff to get her way and manipulate the situation. So she made some, extremely horrible sexual allegations against me. And, right at this time that she made these accusations and was removed, my best friend and business partner, and this was for my consulting business, just out of nowhere passed away at the age of 30. So I have this thing dwelling over me that I think I'm going to go to prison for nothing, that I did nothing, and then my best friend dies. And I'm just like, I am really going through the blender right now. And, it was a good 3 months before everything was settled. Thank God we have the guy who owned our home before us was a Vietnam vet, and he was just way out there, had eight or 9 cameras on the outside. So our entire house has cameras on the outside. And I have a camera in our living room and our kitchen. And every time that she said that comments would be made, it would always be times that I was either on a work trip or where it could be documented by the cameras. So thank God for Ring doorbell cameras and home cameras, because I don't know if I would be here. If not, because some of those accusations were wild. And they were, ones that me as a man, if somebody, was accused of doing that to my daughter, I don't know how I would handle it as a father. And, I'm just very grateful that we got through that time, because I didn't think I was going to. I was a mess, with Bruno dying out of nowhere. That just didn't make things any better. And so after, that case was closed, I told Meg, I said, I think we need to take a break for now. Just for a little bit. Let's recuperate. Let me get my mental health back to where it needs to be. and let's just kind of go from there. And we waited a few months, and then we said, okay, I think we're going to do it again. Our last foster boy that came through, he, had been in, that was his 4th high school in 2 years. That was his 6th home in 2 years. And, again, we just want to help everybody. That's what we're thinking, is that we're going to help everybody. Looking back at it now, I know you can't help everybody. Not everyone is going to be a good fit in your home. And when he came, things were okay. The honeymoon period was fine. And then it just kind of took a huge turn. He just wouldn't want to listen, wouldn't want to do anything that you'd ask. And I get it, you're a teenage boy. That's not, the biggest problem that we're going to have. We're going to get through that. But it became, he started doing drugs in the house. And at first, we just knew it was marijuana. I can't stop you from smoking pot. There's literally nothing that if you're going to smoke in my house, I can stop you. If you're at school smoking a vape in the bathroom, I can't stop you. I don't even know about it. Right. Don't do it in my house. And, I helped him get a job at Walmart. His first week there, he called me and said, I don't have any money. Can you bring me lunch money? I said, you just took a packed lunch that Megan made for you. You have lunch. And he said, yeah, I dropped it. I need money. And I said, I'm not in town. I can't bring you money. I'm sorry. And he ended up borrowing money from a coworker, and he bought some pills with it. And came home that night. He was just acting real strange and was sick. He said he was sick as well. My wife gave him some NyQuil to feel better. And about an hour later, he was just completely out of it, almost in a vegetative state. And we rushed to the ER. Tons of pills, Perk 30s that I guess have small amounts of fentanyl in them. Marijuana, he had the NyQuil in them. And, we're at the ER at 2:33 a.m. and our caseworker from White's is there, and I'm just like, he's got to go. I just feel like God is saying he's got to go because we're not equipped for this. What if the stuff that he has looks like candy and my son picks it up and he eats it? I couldn't live with myself if my son overdosed on a drug because I let a child into my home because I was taking care of them. What if I wake up in the morning and I got to wake him up for school and he's dead? And then I have to not only live with the fact that a young man died in my home, but I have to live with the fact that parents, although they couldn't be the best parents themselves, they are relying on me to love and take care of their kid. And then he dies in my home. I couldn't live with myself. So I said, we've got to find a new placement for him. And they took him that night. They begged us. They said, let him stay. We promise tomorrow we'll get him into the drug program at White's. And I said, I'm sorry, he just can't. And of course, they tell you all of these promises and they don't come true anyway. And the emergency foster home he was in, he was there for 2 weeks before they finally got him into this program, still doing drugs, still doing all of these things. And it just wasn't the right fit for us. And, I love that boy to death. I wish that he was doing fantastic in life now, but unfortunately, he left our home and he's been in 4 different group homes, a few different foster homes, and he's just self-sabotaging. He's kind of in that point of life where I was. He's almost 18. I was 13, 14, 15 years old when I said, okay, it's time to get my head out of my butt and get my life on track. And it's almost too late for him, and I don't want that to happen. And it's just unfortunate, but I can't do anything about it. And after that, we said, we're just going to put a hold on foster care for now. After having Tyler and then Leroy in, that's 2 tough cases back to back. I get accused of darn near sexual molestation, and then we have a kid who's going to overdose in our home. Like we've got to take a break. I just felt like God was saying, it's okay right now. There's other people out there who are going to do it. And that was about the time that we started coming back to Life Church. And that's pretty much where we're at now to today.
Yeah, and so we're at the end. So we're going to wrap it up with because I think that what you said is true, is that it's not for everybody, but because somebody did, you're here today, And so I think that's the thing that, we're going to keep praying for a broken system because there are more and more kids that are, especially sibling groups, that are out there that need help and that can, we're praying for stories just like yours. Absolutely. I mean, that's what we continue to pray for, and continue to pray that whatever the church's responsibility is, that's what we kept coming back to. Is like, what's the church's role and responsibility in helping this process? Because exactly what you said is, it's a hard process, and it is difficult on families, and can be difficult on marriages, and difficult on, all of those things. So are there ways that we can support? Are there ways that can help? And so we just appreciate you sharing your story. I mean, it's amazing, the things that you went through, how God redeemed that, people in your life, and the things that you're, doing today. So thank you for sharing your story. And again, once this comes out, make sure that you like, share, or comment. That way we can make sure that everybody gets to know and gets to hear your story. And you guys usually come to second service?
Usually, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're watching or if you're listening, make sure you watch, and you can get to know Josh and come up and say hi to him on second service and get to know him a little bit more from there. So
yeah, I'm a pretty nice guy, I think, for this. Real quick, I know we have to finish off. Foster care isn't for everybody, but everyone can do their part to help.
Right.
Not everybody has to be a foster parent, but you can share a Facebook post. You can make a dinner for a foster family. Foster parents are busy. They've got a lot going on. Us as parents, we know that life is busy, but when you add 2 to 3 extra kids who have counseling 3 or 4 times a week, have doctor's appointments in Indianapolis, which is a 2-hour drive, like, life gets busy. Make a meal for them. Pack up a backpack full of clothing and hygiene products. Donate your old duffel bags and luggage, because as a kid who was in foster care, I traveled a lot with black trash bags, and I already felt like trash. So donate your luggage and do your part that way. You don't have to be a foster parent, but you can always help. And if you ever have questions, you can always come to me, and I will guide you and point you in the right direction. I will put you in touch with multiple foster care resources, and if you are interested in becoming a foster parent, talk to me. I will put you in touch with the right people.
There you go. Yeah. Great way to end it. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.